If you haven't seen any of the trailers for this movie and want to go in completely fresh, then don't watch this video until after you've seen the film, because I'll be discussing things that are shown in those trailers. This will still be a spoiler-free review, but if you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, then come back after you've watched it. Alright, let's begin. A year has passed since the events of The Last Jedi, and Kylo Ren is now on a mission to eliminate the resurrected Emperor Palpatine, who poses a threat to the young Supreme Leader. However, Palpatine convinces Ren to work with him and kill Rey, the last remaining Jedi. Meanwhile, Rey and company are busy looking for a way to reach Palpatine's planet to destroy the Sith Lord once and for all. Alright, let me give you a little bit of backstory. I am a diehard Star Wars fan, like many of you I imagine. My introduction to the series was watching the original 1977 picture on Laserdisc when I was 5. I was instantly hooked and followed the franchise since then. I've been there for all the highs and all the lows, be it books, films, or shows. But these new Disney movies have been a mixed bag for me. I'll give you my quick thoughts on each so you can see where I'm coming from. The Force Awakens. A great, joyful return to a beloved universe that admittedly relies on recycled plot points and plenty of nostalgia. Rogue One. A fantastic war film that masterfully blends old and new. Easily the best from this new batch. The Last Jedi. A movie I appreciate far more than I enjoy. Its strengths come from abandoning tradition in favor of bold decisions and new themes, but bogging it down heavily are uninteresting subplots and some poor characterization. Solo. Entertaining at best, but completely pointless and uneventful. So going into episode 9, my expectations were pretty low. The abrupt reversal of directors, the return of Palpatine, it all spelled trouble to me. And after seeing it, I'm sad to say that it was even worse than I could have anticipated. The Rise of Skywalker is a bloated mess that employs familiar story developments and no shortage of fan service in order to waveringly cross the finish line. The film struggles with its identity for many reasons and concludes this new trilogy with a whimper. I'm not even sure where to begin. I know, I'll start by talking about how it follows The Last Jedi and builds on that foundation. It doesn't. You want to know who's really not going to like this movie? Fans of The Last Jedi, because this film goes out of its way to retcon and erase just about everything Rian Johnson set up in Episode 8. I'm not even a big fan of that picture, but you have to respect the storylines it established and the direction it was headed. Episode 9 director J.J. Abrams doesn't do any of that. And I don't want to put all the blame on him, because it feels like the studio had more than a little influence on the final product. Disney didn't like how The Last Jedi was received, and brought Abrams back to regain the acclaim he achieved with The Force Awakens, and Abrams himself seemed to take issue with Johnson's choices regarding the loose ends he provided him, given how Abrams pretty much undoes all of them so he can steer the story in accordance with his vision. The result is a movie that retraces its steps back to the intersection to take the right turn instead of the left it had already committed to. The Rise of Skywalker feels like Abrams is trying to cram his version of Episode 8 into Episode 9, and it produces some major problems, one of the most glaring being Palpatine's inclusion. You can tell me anything you want, that his presence unites the 3 trilogies and gives the saga an interconnectivity, all of that. This was not part of the original script. This was damage control for The Last Jedi. Palpatine's role in the story brings up so many plot holes that it retroactively diminishes the other 2 films. And I don't mean leaps in logic or suspension of disbelief type stuff, I'm talking actual blunders and stupidities that don't make any sense. I can't go into specifics because of spoilers, but what I can say is that his entire plan is so frustratingly convoluted that any ounce of thought immediately forces it to fall apart. Not only that, he acts wildly out of character in this feature. It's great to see Ian McDiarmid back with his deliciously evil voice, it truly is, but this is not Palpatine. All of his motivations run counter to what the character stands for. Also, doesn't his existence devalue the ending of Return of the Jedi, when Vader killed Palpatine to save his son? Palpy's return might be the picture's biggest mistake. He was brought back merely for fan service, and it's painfully obvious. Speaking of fan service, this movie brings it by the bucket load. Some of it is good and works well, particularly a certain moment during the climax that will really excite viewers, especially those who watch the shows. Most of it, though, is shameless and surface level. A lot of it boils down to, look at this, doesn't it remind you of that other movie? I think it's partially used to cover up the sloppy structure this film boasts, and sloppy is sugarcoating it. The story basically amounts to a large-scale scavenger hunt, which could have been fine, but the plot becomes so MacGuffin-centric that it overpowers any dramatic or emotional heft the script contained. It also doesn't help that many impactful moments are deflated by limp reveals, and I'm specifically talking about the death fake-outs here. There are no less than seven fake deaths in this movie, and don't get me started on all the plot conveniences either. The script is simply a jumbled hodgepodge of ideas where the writers threw everything at the wall and hoped it would all stick, including some dialogue exchanges ripped directly from Avengers Endgame, another Disney film, which really makes me question the amount of studio involvement during the filmmaking process. One of the strangest things about The Rise of Skywalker is that it marks the first time the three main heroes share substantial screen time together. That's crazy, isn't it? The banter between the three is mostly good fun, and the potential for a stellar dynamic is there. My favorite example is a very funny exchange during a stressful encounter where Rey, Finn, and Poe are going back and forth about their past lives. There are great moments like this, but that doesn't change the fact that we never saw this trinity develop as a group. It all happened off-screen during the year-long gap that followed The Last Jedi. Their camaraderie is just shown without having been built or earned. So while it's enjoyable, it comes across pretty hollow. Like I mentioned before, this feels like two movies rolled into one. As such, The Rise of Skywalker is awfully dense with material. One poke of a stick and the whole thing would burst at the seams, that's how packed it is. It tries to cover so much in a 142-minute runtime that it ends up skimming through most of it. This also causes the editing to be extremely choppy. Not only are individual sequences much shorter to fit everything in, but the cuts themselves are more frequent, often making the film feel very jarring and disjointed. There's an awesome, inspired action scene near the beginning of the film, where the characters perform something called lightspeed skipping, which means going into hyperspace for a few seconds, exiting to appear somewhere random, and repeating this process several times to lose pursuers. This is a standout moment, and a perfect analogy to describe the pacing and editing of the movie. So many plot points, characters, and locations are introduced, but we spend so little time with them that none are able to sink in with the audience before we're whisked away to the next scene. The feature moves at a breakneck pace, as if it's in a hurry to reach its conclusion. There's hardly a quiet moment where the characters are allowed to reflect on the situation. The film is too busy spouting exposition to set aside time for any of that. Episode 9 is so overly concerned with a plot that is far more complicated than it needs to be that it lacks personality and depth. In addition to the whiplash-inducing pacing and jagged editing, the cinematography is surprisingly lackluster. Don't get me wrong, there are a few great shots in here, but nothing really unique or memorable. The colors don't pop quite like they did in the last two pictures, the shot composition is shockingly bland. Overall, the camera work leaves no impression, not even during the action sequences, which, outside of the lightspeed chase, are also comparatively dull. The lightsaber duel amidst the crashing waves is the closest we get to thrilling, but the cinematography fails to give it that final push. The movie isn't entirely without positives, however. C-3PO is the unexpected MVP with tons of hilarious lines. Lando's extended cameo is delightful. The visual effects are top-notch, as is to be expected. The performances are good all around, Babu Frick is amazing, there's stuff to like. But it's all completely overshadowed by the countless missteps. The Knights of Ren, who've been built up for 2 films now, do absolutely nothing. Important questions from The Force Awakens remain unanswered. We're given yet another form of Death Star, the Dark Rey premise teased in the trailers goes nowhere. It's pretty clear now that there was no plan for the sequel trilogy. The idea was to have each director offer their own creative take, but without a singular vision to unite them, it doesn't work. The original trilogy had 3 different directors that all worked under George Lucas's creative guidance. Even the prequels, love 'em or hate 'em, had a roadmap and knew the story they wanted to tell. This new trio of films now feels like a tug of war between 2 directors with opposite opinions, instead of a cohesive narrative, which begs the question, if there was no plan, then what was the point of these movies? Any themes you can pick out have either been done before or go against what The Last Jedi set up. You know, the predecessor to this picture? The Rise of Skywalker brings nothing new to the table and doesn't fit with its two contemporaries either. There isn't even a consistent motif that runs through this new series because of the conflicting visions. So in the end, they served no greater purpose than to rack up revenue for the studio. The Rise of Skywalker will definitely have its fans. Unfortunately, I'm just not one of them. The poor video game plotting, lack of resonant or new themes, Swiss cheese logic, toddler-like attention span, and rushed nature of it all combines to form a downright disappointing feature. The absence of a blueprint yields terrible results, and the childish manner in which Abrams and the studio addressed the previous installment's ideas is appalling. The final line is the cherry on top of this lousy sundae. It's an insult not only to the entire Skywalker saga, but also to the movie itself, which is astonishing. Luckily, we have The Mandalorian on Disney Plus to rinse out the bad taste this picture leaves. Episode 9 is a cautionary tale of why you should never make a film to please an audience, and I sincerely hope that some lessons will be learned by the mistakes made for the future. I give Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, a D+. Thank you so much for watching this review. If you liked the video, then please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel for similar content because that would really help me out. You can also follow me on Twitter at MiamiMovieMan, and if you want to keep up with what I'm watching, then go ahead and look me up on Letterboxd as well. I'm the Miami Movie Man, and I'll see you in the next video.